WCNC Charlotte. This is Flashpoint, where power and politics collide and the tough questions get asked and answered.
Thanks for joining us here on Flashpoint. I'm Ben Thompson. Lawmakers back in Raleigh as they get ready to tackle several big issues over the next several weeks. For Republicans, the main priority is the state budget. They're looking to consider additional raises and tax cuts, and they could take up bills regarding Sunday liquor sales and casinos as well. Another big focus will be on immigration. Polling says it's one of the most polarizing topics here in North Carolina. And now there's a new push to force local sheriffs to comply with immigration and custom enforcement. And some worry it could go way too far. Joining us now is Stephanie Arteaga. She's the co-director of the Carolina Migrant Network. Welcome back to Flashpoint, Stephanie. Nice to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I know there's a lot at stake here for a lot of people, but I want to set the stage so folks at home understand specifically what we're talking about. Traditionally, local deputies have not been in the business of enforcing federal immigration laws, whether it's here or across the country. But now the state Senate looking at a bill already passed in the House that would force sheriff departments to help immigration agents and hold people suspected of being in the country illegally for up to 48 hours. It gets me that fair-minded people could listen to that and wonder themselves, well, why shouldn't there be more cooperation between, say, local law enforcement and federal law enforcement? And what would you say to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have to remember that federal immigration law is something that is governed or overseen by the federal government. And there are pathways for the federal government to collaborate with local law enforcement, but it's absolutely voluntary. And what's extremely concerning about this bill is the type of documentation that state representatives and folks in the Senate are trying to use to hold individuals are documents that are not warrants. And so we have extreme concerns around racial profiling, civil rights concerns, and certainly just like the well-being of our community overall. You said these things should be voluntary. And a lot of folks wonder, wait, why would this be voluntary? Explain. Yeah, so it's absolutely voluntary under federal law. This is part of a bill that was passed in 1996, which allows sheriff's deputies to have discretion on the type of relationship that they want to have with local law enforcement and ICE. And so this is something that we've seen consistently across the state. What we've seen is a shift in the type of documentation and warrants the sheriffs want to use. This does not mean that they're not collaborating with ICE. There's different ways that sheriffs can actually do so. And in fact, what this bill does is confuse individuals around what is actually happening in our county jails. People who are going into county jails for XYZ reason have a judicial process to go through. And what this bill is attempting to do is hold individuals for an additional 48 hours past their judicial process, which we are extremely concerned around what potential civil rights violations might occur as a result of that.
The Mecklenburg County Sheriff ended the 287G program, which sort of implemented some of these things on his first day in office back in 2018. It was an agreement between the department and immigration agents. The Observer estimates that it sent about 15,000 people into deportation proceedings between 2006 and 2018 when Sheriff McFadden ended it. Now, supporters will say that's proof that a partnership works, but I assume you have a different argument.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely do. You know, when we look at the data of the individuals that were placed into deportation proceedings, we know that 2/3 of those individuals were folks with low-level misdemeanors, sometimes even traffic citations. And so when we really look at the impact of these programs, we really see two things: serious economic burdens on our communities. We're not getting paid by the federal government to enforce these programs. And certainly through this bill, the state is not paying counties, sheriff's departments to enforce this bill that will have significant repercussions either through lawsuits, through some sort of civil rights violations that may occur. And of course, the amount of fear that immigrant communities will have to contact local law enforcement. It will not make us safe. It is a financial burden. And to top it all off, we know that North Carolina heavily relies on immigrant labor. And we might see a scenario like we saw in Florida last summer where people just left the state overnight.
As you are well aware, I'm sure, Republicans do have a supermajority in both the House and Senate in Raleigh. So if this passes, what do you see the implications of if sheriffs are forced to comply with immigration?
You know, as I mentioned previously, I think that we will see significant civil rights violations, significant fear. There's plenty of studies actually outside from Mecklenburg County over the past 12 years that shows that children born to foreign-born parents are most likely to be underweight. People do not seek critical health care or support from local law enforcement. Going back, we really need to see this as an economic issue as well. North Carolina heavily relies on immigrant labor, whether it's through the hog industry or the construction industry right here at home. And so we are going to see migrant workers or immigrants in general that will not feel safe in North Carolina. And that's heavily going to impact our economy, not including the cost that it will take to run this program. Just to give you an idea, a couple of years ago, it cost $215 to hold somebody in Mecklenburg County Jail. Multiply that by 2 days that this bill requires folks to be held additionally, times an average of 1,500 individuals. We're talking about a significant amount of money that taxpayers are going to have to foot because our state legislature is interested in using immigrants as a scapegoat rather than tackling serious issues that North Carolinians have, like the fact that we can't afford housing, the fact that inflation is really killing us. And so it's a very unfortunate bill, and I really implore communities and voters to contact their representative.
There is on this issue, like many issues, an urban and rural divide. And you do have sheriffs out there in more rural areas who say they see the relationship beneficial between ICE and their own department. Argument is about public safety. How do you respond to those people?
That's a great question. You know, when we look at the population of immigrants in North Carolina, we see that many of these immigrants are actually reviving counties, specifically out in the east, that have dying populations. And so I think this is consistent with the change, the racial demographics that we're seeing in our country, and a lot of the anti-immigrant xenophobic narrative we're seeing across the country in general. And we've really looked at the data. The Cato Research Institute shows that immigrants are less likely to commit crime than foreign-born native-born community members. So the data does not back those theories.
You mentioned xenophobia. Given the political climate right now, should immigrants here in North Carolina be concerned?
Well, you know, I am an immigrant myself. I am concerned about this bill. I am concerned about the path we're going in North Carolina. When we look at Charlotte in the 80s, there was extreme recruitment, serious recruitment to bring people of Latin American descent to help build this city. And so we really need to think as a community, what does it mean to invite newcomers into our community to be part of it? And what is it? How can we reckon with the fact that we are looking to throw them under a bus for political gain?
All right, Stefania Arteaga, co-director of the Carolina Migrant Network. Stefania, thanks for coming on. We do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Still coming on Flashpoint, Southern governors trying to stop efforts to unionize some auto plants. Next, why South Carolina's top leader says it could be devastating to the state's economy.